Good afternoon, everyone. It is Sunday, and I was just sitting down to do some knitting and thought I would show you what I'm working on. It is pretty dark and dreary outside at the moment. It's a little bit like foggy, kind of looks like a horror movie. I'm going to set you down because my arms are going to get tired. You can see my sleeping cat in the background. I'm just sitting down for an afternoon coffee. When we did our Christmas grocery shopping, I bought some mocha peppermint creamer and it is so delicious. I've been putting it in my coffee every day and it's like basically a dessert. It doesn't really even taste like coffee anymore, but it's really good. But I'm hitting that point with it where like I can't eat sugar every day or drink sugar every day anymore. I just have had so much sugar, so I'm kind of getting sugared out, but it's really good. So I wanted to show you a pair of socks that I'm working on. They are very like wintry, kind of Christmassy, but they're not Christmas socks because I'm generally a pretty slow knitter and I did have some Christmas gifts that I was knitting, and so I didn't want to box myself into having to finish these socks at like a certain time and then feel like, so last year, I think it was last year or the year before, I knit a pair of Christmas socks of the same exact yarn actually, just a different colorway. And I didn't finish them in time for Christmas. And so the second sock sat for so long because I just wasn't in the mood anymore. I just wasn't motivated to knit Christmas socks. So I don't know how I feel about Christmas socks. They're fun to wear now that I have a pair of them, but I don't know if I'll make another pair because I'm just so slow with knitting socks. Anyway, so this is the pair of socks that I'm knitting. It is the Arne and Carlos Regia Pairfect, and so it's supposed to make like a perfect pair. And so you start with your cuff. I think you can knit them toe up if you want to, but I always knit my socks cuff down. So you start with the white cream yarn, you knit a cuff. Mine ended up being very long, so I just cuffed it. And then it has this design. I'm sure you all know what this yarn is, but I'm just showing in case. And then once you get to the next cream section, you start the heel. And I just did a heel flap and gusset because that's the heel that I do on all of my socks. And then I had a little bit of extra cream yarn with my heel, and so the last pair of socks that I knit, just one second, let me grab them. So when I knit these socks, I knit, I think I knit the OMG heel by Megan Williams, and it's basically a short row heel, but it has like this very small heel flap, and so it adds a little bit of extra room for the arch because generally short row heels like this don't fit me very well. But I think I just was like, I was so new to knitting with this type of sock yarn that I thought you had to knit a short row heel with this yarn, and I have since learned that you do not have to. As long as you like the look of the heel flap, you don't have to knit a short row heel. So with these socks, I had a ton of extra green yarn. And so I remember like cutting the yarn for the cuff. And then I also, once I got to the green yarn for the heel, I just knit the heel in the green yarn. And then when I was ready to start the foot again, I just cut off the extra. And since this was such a small like short row heel, there was a lot of extra green yarn. And so I just cut that off. And then same with the foot because they give you a lot of extra yarn so you can knit pretty much any size sock. So I just cut the yarn when I was ready to put the toe in. And so that's how I did it for these. And I did have a lot of extra tails to weave in. It also kind of disrupted the flow, I think, of what this sock yarn is supposed to do, which is just to give you the opportunity to just knit and not have to like worry too much about like, oh, how long did I do the cuff on my first sock, and like, you know, am I using the same amount of yarn for both socks, that sort of thing. So with this other sock I'm knitting with the Pairfect yarn, I decided to pretty much allow the yarn to determine my sock. So you can tell that I have a very long cuff, which I actually kind of like. I've never done that before. And then I just knit until I reached the cream. And so this is how long of a leg I have. Pretty much I'm just following the instructions a little bit more and kind of doing what I'm like supposed to be doing. But I just thought that would be a little bit more fun, relaxing, I guess, because I don't have to think about it as much. And both socks will be the exact same, or at least that's the hope. So I probably will cut the yarn when I get to the toe, because I think I'll have extra yarn for the foot, but that'll be it. Otherwise I followed the yarn exactly. So it's such a pretty colorway. It's very wintry to me, and so I felt like it was perfect for the Christmas season, or the winter season, but not necessarily any like holiday specific or anything like that. So yeah, I'm really liking these. So this is the yarn, and then that's what the socks will pretty much look like. They'll look very similar to that. And I know that this yarn is very popular, and it's a pretty cool idea. It's also like relatively expensive for what it is. I think it's close to $20 US. I got mine 50% off, which I think is a little bit more of a reasonable price for a pair of socks. I mean, obviously I'm having fun with just knitting the yarn and letting it shape my sock versus like thinking a little bit more about how long my cuff is going to be and that sort of thing. But I also think that this is so easy to mimic yourself. I know that Drops has a yarn that kind of has this like color work-esque look to it. From afar, it kind of looks like color work a little bit. It's a cool design. But I know that there are other companies that make this type of yarn, and honestly, I knit a pair of Drops socks with their kind of version of this yarn. So this is the sock that I knit with the Drops yarn. I can't find the other sock right now, but it's because I wear these all the time. And I machine wash and dry these. These are like the only socks I think I do that with. Honestly, they look great. Like, I've worn and washed these a lot, and they're a little bit more worn like throughout the foot. These are clean, by the way. But I think they look great, and I will link that yarn below because I can't remember the exact name of it, but it looks really, really similar. In fact, I actually think it looks a little bit better than the Arne and Carlos Regia one. You can see the Drops is a little bit more stripy, so there's more solid stripes than the Regia, but I kind of think that the definition in the Drops one is like a little bit better. And I think that the feel of the yarns are very similar. And the Drops yarn obviously does not have the heels, toes, and cuffs like built into the skein, but it's so easy to do your own. Really, it is. And that's kind of what makes like this a little bit gimmicky, is that even though it is fun and kind of relaxing to just let the yarn, you know, shape your sock basically, it's also so easy to just switch colors and match, you know, find a gray from your stash or something and just like match the yarns. So I just thought I would mention that because I remember when I was first getting into sock knitting, this was like the popular sock yarn, and it's pretty cool, I will say, but I definitely, it was a splurge for me. Honestly, a $20 pair of socks is still a splurge for me. I don't know if that will ever not be a splurge for me, but I do feel like it's a little bit gimmicky. It's still fun to knit, but if you are kind of on a budget or you just don't want to spend that much money on a pair of socks that you make, I really like this yarn. And I'm sure that there are other companies who make this type of yarn as well. I should really look into that because these are like some of my favorite socks to knit. They're just a lot of fun. So anyway, I'm on the first sock of this pair. I knit my socks on US zeros. My socks are generally 60 stitches. That seems to be the right stitch count for me. And then when I am decreasing the stitches for the gusset, I usually go down to like 56 stitches for the foot. So the leg is a little bit bigger than the foot. And that like recipe works out really well for me. So I'm going to continue knitting on my socks and drinking my delicious coffee. I think we're going to go to the grocery store a little bit later and might do some baking tonight. I also have like a million vlogmases to catch up on because I have not been able to keep up with everyone's vlogmas. It's been a lot of fun. I've loved watching everyone's vlogmas, but there are so many to watch. So I'll probably catch up on that tonight as well. Okay, so I'm back from the grocery store. Thankfully, they had corn syrup. So we are going to be making Millionaire shortbread, which I have never made before. I don't think I've ever had it before either, but it sounds really good. And I actually got this book recently. This is the America's Test Kitchen 100 Techniques book, and there is a Millionaire shortbread recipe in here. So I thought that was perfect. I think I can do this. I have some confidence, so we'll see how far that takes me. I think I'm most worried about the caramel. I think tempering the chocolate, which I've never done before, is not going to be too difficult, but we'll see. I'm not much of a baker. I don't bake very often, so we'll see how this turns out. Hopefully it's good. So what I got at the store was corn syrup, heavy whipping cream. It calls for heavy cream, but I could only find heavy whipping cream. Sweetened and condensed milk. Ghirardelli 60% bittersweet chocolate, 8 ounces of this. It's a lot of chocolate. We needed butter. And then I also picked up a candy thermometer because I think ours broke last time we used it. So I just bought another one. And then I think I have all the other ingredients. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna go ahead and read through the recipe and we'll see how this goes. All right, so the shortbread is out of the oven. I think it's looking pretty good. I'm just letting it cool. And I'm about to start on the caramel. Hi, hello. All right, so I am reading through the recipe one more time. Got all my ingredients right here. I think I'm ready. It can't be that hard, right? This is probably like the richest recipe that I've ever made, which is funny because it's called Millionaire Shortbread, but I don't think I've used so many like rich sugary ingredients in one dish before. I'm kind of curious if you can freeze this because I have no idea how we're going to eat this in a week. This recipe literally calls for 3 sticks of butter. That's insane. So much butter. Okay, so now I just need to heat this over medium heat until it hits temperature. And I do have my candy thermometer here, and I think it's supposed to take like 20 minutes. So while the shortbread cools, I'm just going to cook this. And then it needs to chill for like an hour and a half. So that's gonna be my knitting break. Okay, so here's the caramel. I'm not quite sure if it turned out. I have no idea if I did it right. So we're gonna let it sit. It needs to sit for an hour and a half before I can put the chocolate on top. I will say that that was a somewhat stressful experience. I had to call my boyfriend up to help because I think that the caramel was like burning on the bottom. I thought I was ruining it. And then the candy thermometer that I bought couldn't stick to the, or couldn't fit on the side of the pan without touching the bottom of the pan. It's not supposed to touch the bottom of the pan. So I was like holding it in the middle of the pan while I was stirring the entire time, burning my hands. And then I grabbed our nice thermometer to like double check the temp and burnt my hand and dropped it in. So hopefully this is still okay. Next, I get to temper some chocolate. So we'll see if I get to that tonight. It's a few days later, but I wanted to debrief how the Millionaire Shortbread turned out. And it's really delicious. Everything, like that recipe was amazing. But my caramel did turn out too hard, which was very disappointing in the moment. I think there were a couple of factors. I think my heat was too high. I think my pot was too big. And both of those things I followed the recipe on. It said to use medium heat and use a large pot. But I think if the pot had been smaller, I would have actually been able to use the candy thermometer as you're supposed to, without the thermometer touching the bottom of the pan, and it just would have been a little bit easier to get a read on how hot it was, because I never actually hit temp. I was like 20 degrees cooler than it was supposed to be, but I think that it got way too hot and I cooked it for way too long because my thermometer was telling me it wasn't hot enough. Anyway, so I think that's why it turned out too hard. I was going for the like softball range. However, next time I'll be a little bit more prepared, because I looked up some tutorials on how to actually test your caramel before you take it off the stove, and make sure that it is the softness that you want it to be. Since it was so difficult to eat, I was kind of planning on throwing it out, but I found that if I put a bar in the microwave for like 15 to 20 seconds, the chocolate stays relatively hard and the caramel gets really soft. So what almost turned out to be a somewhat mediocre attempt actually turned out pretty delicious. So I'm counting it as a win. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.